Yesterday, I hit my Zoom breaking point. I was logged onto the Mid-America Regional Assembly site and our internet went down. Signing on was a bit more complicated in terms of I needed to have an identity that would get recognized and pass through a waiting room and into the assembly. Let's just say the second time around didn't quite work out as easily as the first. Before I was back online, I burst into tears of frustration, and I felt just simply done with technology and Zoom. It's a miserable way to start a Saturday, but the tears were probably coming for a time. If I'm being totally honest, I know it wasn't just technology that led me to a breaking point. I had an earlier conversation with my mother, and the topic of the continual pullback on environmental protections and regulations came up. My heart felt, actually it feels, so heavy. It's been wretched to watch all of the progress that has been made in terms of understanding that we as humans need to protect our greatest shared asset, and watching this progress be reversed. My mind and my heart reel as I try to come to terms with the politicalization of protecting our planet and the environment. I can feel rage and fear deep in my body as I think of an administration that places capitalism and domination of our precious resources over the very real science telling us that everything we do today, everything, has a serious impact on our shared future living on this vulnerable planet. This is a place that I and many of you can go quickly. It's a place that can eat us up from the inside out, immobilize us, isolate us, and dominate our sleeping and waking hours. It is widely known that what occupies our thoughts impacts our emotions and even our well-being. If we spend most of our daily lives in despair, that has a negative impact on our bodies, minds, hearts, and spirits. The weight of a continuously pessimistic worldview can literally weigh us down and extinguish hope. Last Sunday, Katie and I started to explore our 3 core values for Michael Servetus Unitarian Society. Last Sunday, we explored the value of mindful interconnectedness, and we focused on the human aspect of interconnectedness. I noticed last week that we left out the interconnectedness with the earth, but this Sunday, Earth Day Sunday, brings forth the interconnected web of life, which is central to Unitarian Universalist principles. It also lifts up another one of our core values at MSUS, courageous love. Earth Day, as we've already learned from the story of Gaylord Nelson, calls forth our interconnectedness, both on a global and local level. For many UU congregations, Earth Day eclipses the religious traditions of Easter or Passover. In a sense, Earth Day, honored in deep reflection, recognition of our harmful actions, some may call them sins, and a belief in rising again or renewal, can be a very powerful time of the year in the lives of UUs. I think it's fitting to find time to reflect on the value of courageous love. Courageous love calls us into relationship with one another in the form of beloved community. It also calls us into the love of the land and the planet. Courageous love is something we strive to express to each other and to Earth. At the center of our faith is a belief that we all have inherent worth and dignity, and also at the center is our relationship with the Earth. Courageous love asks us to make visible that which is often invisible. UU minister and professor David Bumbaugh wrote, "We are called to define the religious and spiritual dimensions of the ecological crisis confronting the world, and to preach the gospel of a world where each is part of all, where everyone is sacred, and every place is holy ground, where all are children of the same great love, all embarked on the same journey, and all destined for the same end." Our faith is built on a bedrock of reason and the importance of science. We don't shy away from calling out divisive politics and capitalism as destructive forces. We are charged with creating a counter narrative to division and greed, one that points to the world we want to live in, where equity and justice thrive. And finally, courageous love requires that we act. Action may look different for different people in our congregation, but we cannot remain neutral or inactive when we are defined by the core value of courageous love. Courageous love needs to be expressed, experienced, named or narrated, and acted upon. Courageous love can and should ignite everything we do. I appreciate that on this historic 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we return to its origin. Yes, you can point to one man who started it. However, Gaylord was very clear that unless Earth Day became a grassroots movement, it would not succeed. It's hard to believe that at the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, with a global pandemic in full force, we have a government which is currently, right now, continuing to strip away even more protections for our Earth. Last year, we saw something beautiful, a picture of courageous love. Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old, gave an impassioned speech at the United Nations Climate Action Summit just 7 months ago. Do you remember Greta declaring, "Our life is on fire. I am here to say our life is on fire." Oh, actually, she said, "Our house is on fire. I am here to say our house is on fire." The global climate strike that followed took place across the world. Our local strike was led by young people from across Minnesota. The young people were of all ethnicities and races, a range of economic and immigration status, and came from urban and rural communities. The UU Ministry for the Earth held organizing calls prior to that event that were led by youth. And large numbers of youth and adults who were part of Unitarian Universalist congregations showed up at their nation's capitals and in public squares, calling out for the recognition of the dangers of climate change. They called on our own culpability in making it happen and the need for immediate climate justice. The complexity of this time speaks volumes as to the challenges ahead when working on climate justice. We see division being fueled right now with something as concrete as this pandemic, with growing numbers of those infected and dying. Our governor, who's leaning heavily on science and the reports of those on the front line of the epidemic and knowledgeable forecasters, is being challenged by our own president. Our nation's president has called out via a tweet to those who deny science and place individual freedom ahead of the common good. He has called out to liberate Minnesota. It's not just a call for disobedience. This is a battle cry when there are actually lives at stake and there is no room for us to wage war against one another. Earth Day, climate justice, requires that we prioritize the common good. The planet we share doesn't distinguish between Republicans and Democrats. It doesn't distinguish between those who rely on reason or extreme beliefs, young or old. You get the point. The climate crisis is impacted by every sector of our society, yet I believe divisive politics and greeds in the hands of those with a disproportionate amount of power has pitted us against them. Jobs against the environment, livelihoods against environmental protections. We are being led and manipulated by those in power, and the result is that none of us will win, even those who are disregarding concrete scientific signs and fueling the demise of our planet. Greta does not shy away from naming the danger of viewing success through a lens of capitalism and financial rewards. Yet one of the reasons she captured our hearts and the imagination is the way she delivers this harsh reality, coupled with hope. She says on climate change, we have to acknowledge we have failed. All political movements in their present form have done so, and the media has failed to create broad public awareness. But she says. Homo sapiens have not yet failed. Yes, we are failing, but there's still time to turn everything around. We can still fix this. We still have everything in our own hands, but unless we recognize the overall failures of our current systems, we most probably won't stand a chance. She boldly says, we are facing a disaster of spoken sufferings for enormous amounts of people. And now is not the time for speaking politely or focusing on what we can or cannot say. Now is the time to speak clearly. That prophetic voice is what she is calling out. She says, speak clearly and act clearly as well. Courageous love, it doesn't prioritize politeness, turning our backs on one another or the planet, or remaining silent in the face of suffering. Courageous love centers interconnectedness, and it won't succumb to the forces which try to silence or separate us. We're living in the time of a global pandemic, a human disaster that is teaching us in very concrete ways that everyone is connected. Rebecca Solnit says, the first lesson a disaster teaches is that everything is connected. In fact, she says, disasters are crash courses in those connections. At moments of immense change, we see with new clarity the systems, political, economic, social, ecological, in which we are immersed as they change around us. We see what's strong, what's weak, what's corrupt, what matters, and what doesn't. She says, those who refuse to acknowledge the fact of science in relation to this pandemic and climate change see science as an impingement on absolute freedom. Freedom being another word for absolutely no limits on the pursuit of self-happiness. And yet, she continues, if everything is connected, then the consequences of every choice and act and word have to be examined, which we see as love in action. Courageous love. Not simply love in our hearts, but love that expands beyond human relationships and into love for the earth and our shared future. Let Earth Day be a day where we look seriously at what courageous love looks like in action in our own lives and the lives of this congregation. Many of you will remember the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, Susan Fredrick Gray, telling us, this is no time for a casual faith. We must move beyond our despair and our isolation and our anger and our willingness to accept this us versus them framework that's being fed to us daily. I signed up for an online Earth Day Live, which is running from April 22nd through Friday. Activists and performers, thought leaders, and artists will come together for empowering and inspiring in a communal 3-day live stream mobilization. I just plan to have it on the back burner in my house, whatever I'm doing. I know that personally, I am lifted and inspired by those who are in the heart of movements, and I'm hopeful that the education and the energy and the motivation and commitment of those participating in Earth Day Live will move me out of some of my complacency and into greater action. The house is indeed on fire. We each need to pick up a bucket, clear the debris, call in support, and fight with determination in order to save it. May it be so, and amen.